Years ago, you could have been a hippie, and now you have gender dysphoria. And I question where that's taking us, where it's taking our society. I have some sound I want to play for you because this is actually a big deal, guys. I mean, again, we can kind of look at this and say, wow, that's one little thing, one outlier. We were upset, we're mad. But this is like happening all across society right now. And that's probably a bad thing. I mean, hey, did you see the Navy recruiter? I got to show you guys. You probably saw this. This is wild. Take a look at the picture. So apparently, this is who's recruiting people for the Navy because, recruiting's down. So they got to do something about it. I mean, this is just weird, right? I mean, come on. I'm so getting over this. I'm curious to know what you guys, somebody has some investing questions. I'm glad you have some investing questions, Jake, because actually, as we talk about, we're going to get to the default in just a moment, as we think about what's going on socially and we combine that with what's going on economically. I mean, we really are looking at some problems. Coming up, I'm actually going to have a guest tonight, Hans Humes. He is the CEO of Greylock Capital. He's looking at it from the perspective of what would it mean really if the U.S. were to default on our debt? And hint, it's not good. All right, it's really and truly not good. I mean, that would be that would be quite a legacy for Joe Biden to have. My gosh, it would be a disaster for sure. And Hans's point, and he'll talk about this himself, is just sort of that we need to be cautious because there are countries all around the world that want to effectively weaponize that, right? They want us to default. And then they could replace us as the world's reserve currency. So these are real issues. Everybody's weighing in on this picture. I mean, this picture is just, the picture says it all. I really can't believe it. Apparently, the U.S. Navy, this is according to a report, and this picture, by the way, is from Daily Mail. The U.S. Navy has chosen a person that is a drag queen to somehow recruit more people to be in the Navy. I mean, wow. China, here we are. Game over. It's over. Don't forget, China has a very male population. For years they had that one child rule, and there were a lot of baby girls that lost their lives as a result of that. Really, really sad stuff. And they're left with a dominantly male population. So there's no sort of female, and I say that female, right, to kind of even out some of that testosterone that's going to be out there in China. And so you think about what's going on here. We've got almost this feminization, right, of men. And then over in China, they've got the opposite. That can't be good. And if you think about it from a historical perspective, trying to see if I have Camille Paglia here for you. If you think about it from a historical perspective, this is really, really, really bad stuff. I want to share with you, some of you who listen to the podcast regularly, you may have heard me play some of this before. This woman is a very liberal feminist who maybe is so liberal, she's now coming full circle. I don't know. But she made the point as far back as 2016 that we are at risk of something really bad. When you have this much, sort of feminization of men and this much confusion over who we are. I mean, you don't even know if you're male or female? Come on. If you don't know that, how do you know yourself at all? How does a society know itself? It's crazy. John, I had never heard of Dylan either. John writing in that he had never heard of Dylan before this whole Bud Light fiasco. I had not heard of him either at all, but now he's sort of come into the mainstream world, and he keeps getting more deals. I mean, Maybelline is advertising his, he's got an advertisement for Maybelline, the makeup. And I used to use their eyeliner and their foundation. I'm like, So Maybelline's one, Nike's one. The guy's cleaning up. It's really, really pretty darn wild. And somebody's asking, AB says that they've only lost 1% of global sales. Here's what you need to know. This is one of the biggest beer companies in the world. So with that in mind, I'd recommend you do your research. because there's a whole lot of brands over there at AB InBev, right? You can just go down the list. I mean, Bud Light's nothing. Someone told me the other day, well, just so angry about this. And this guy, he loved Bud Light, loved it. It was like all he'd ever drunk his entire life. And he is so hurt by this. He's like, I can't drink it. I just can't possibly drink it. And he switched, he said, to Mick Ultra. Lower carbs, I guess. Worse taste, if that can even possibly be imagined. But here's the thing. Mick Ultra is still Anheuser-Busch. So you've got to actually, I think as a consumer, start to say, wait a second, what do I really want? Maybe it's better to, support a local brewery. Anheuser-Busch used to be a local brewery before it got bought by the Brazilians for $52 billion and became a multinational conglomerate with headquarters over there in Brussels. U.S. headquarters moved out of St. Louis into New York City. You've seen the commercials. They're like desperately trying to get everybody back. And people are like, hey, sorry, I don't buy it. I don't believe it. And the CEO can go on an earnings call and say, you know what? It was just this one influencer, just this one spot, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's kind of like game over. I don't think this beer is coming back. Tell me if you agree, disagree. I'm just curious because it's wild. Northeast Ohio. John, good to see you there in Northeast Ohio. Gary, hey, good to have you here. What is my schedule on YouTube? Good question. I typically, just so you guys all know, I typically record the show. And then you see it later. And then sometimes I'm just like, you know what? To heck with it. Let's just do it live. Let's do it live, right? It means that, you hear a little bit more of those ums and you see me like taking a drink of water every now and then. Because, I don't have the commercials like I did on TV. Not the same kind. Not when we're live anyway. We're just live streaming. And I love hearing from you. I feel like we have a connectivity that we don't really have when it's not live. But I'm going to try and get a schedule. Maybe like, what do you think? 1 o'clock? Maybe we could do this like at 1 o'clock every day. Would that work for everyone? Would it work for me? I think it might. 1 o'clock would be good. Certainly would beat 10:35 at night on a Friday, but it's good to see you. It's good to see you. Okay, so we still have a whole lot more to talk about because your reaction there to Miss Navy, I'm sorry. Like, hey, I sent it to one person who is in the military or was in the military and wrote back with a picture of how to speak Mandarin, learn to speak Mandarin. In other words, the point being, we're all going to be speaking Mandarin if this is what we care about more than actually really the strength of our military. Consider what Jennifer Granholm was saying the other day. Jennifer Granholm, our energy secretary, who's obsessed with making sure that we have green energy vehicles all over the world for our military. Like, so your Humvee is going to be green. It's an EV. Like, I don't know how that's going to work, right? Like, you get a charging station everywhere. Is that the idea? We're going to build out charging stations so our military can handle this. It is really kind of nuts. Again, I'm just looking through your questions. A lot of you like gold. Full disclosure, one of our wonderful advertisers is legacypminvestments.com. You can buy and sell gold there at legacypminvestments.com. Gold has obviously been trending higher because I think there is just so much uncertainty out there. So certainly in play, especially as we come up right on this debt ceiling, and nobody seems to want to have the conversation that needs to be had, which is you need to stop spending. How can no one understand this? I really would like to know. They are so wedded to their pet projects and to this idea that you just need to spend, that you are going to have a really bad inflationary type scenario. The reason this, again, is important as we look at this Navy girl right here is that this is not good news for a civilization. I want you to hear Camille Paglia, as I said, noted feminist, talking about the issue. Take a listen and we'll weigh in. You can write in and tell me what you think as you hear it. This is something else.
Now, I began all of my studies, my book, Sexual Personae, began as a dissertation at Yale Graduate School on androgyny. I've always been fascinated, attracted, to the subject of androgyny, and that's what sexual personae is. I explored it in history. But the more I explored it, I realized that, that historically, the movement toward androgyny occurs in late phases of culture, okay, as a civilization is starting to unravel, okay, and that you can find it again and again and again through history in the Greek art, okay, you can see it happening. All of a sudden, okay, there's a kind of the sculptures of handsome nude young men athletes that used to be very robust, okay, in the archaic period suddenly began to seem like wet noodles, okay, toward the end, okay, and that the people who live in such periods, a late phase of culture, whether it's the Hellenistic era, whether it's the Roman Empire, whether it's the Mauve decade of Oscar Wilde in the 1890s, whether it's Weimar Germany, people who live at such times, okay, feel that they're very sophisticated, they're very cosmopolitan, okay, homosexuality, heterosexuality, so what, anything goes, and so on, all right, and so, but from the perspective of historical distance, okay, you can see that it's a culture that no longer believes in itself, okay, and then what you invariably get are people who are convinced of the power of heroic masculinity, okay, on the edges, whether they're the Vandals and the Huns, okay, or whether they're the barbarians of ISIS. Okay, you see them,
Okay, this is very important. You heard what she was saying. Like, we are actually really and truly at risk of something here. I mean, this is perplexing to me that it's all happening right now. And so I've been just like, as a student of history, trying to like go and figure out, like, has this ever happened before? And if you listen to Camille, I mean, she points out that yes, indeed, there is this kind of change in even the art that you can see in all these various times. And then, people look at sort of the 1890s, the decadence of the Oscar Wilde time, and the literature, of that particular time period. And then you think about what was going on in sort of Germany prior to World War II. And I was reading some very interesting historical accounts of that, with gender identity being in question. And so when all these things are in question, there are other problems that come about as a result. And Dinesh D'Souza, my friend Dinesh D'Souza, who has the Dinesh D'Souza podcast. We were talking about this, in fact, on just yesterday's program. And I want to play you a clip right here of Dinesh and myself getting into this, because he's got some very good points. I mean, it's concerning as a civilization.
He's the greatest Muslim historian of the Middle Ages. And he said all civilizations go through a period. He kind of compared it to the human growth. So you begin as a child, the civilization is in infancy, it's developing its basic principles. Then you have the strength of adolescence and youth, in which the civilization is vigorous. And then he says over time, the civilization becomes kind of unsure of itself. It begins to lose strength and it goes into a sort of decay. And of course, his focus was about why that happens. Now, I think what Kamal Paglia is saying is that the reason it happens is that when the civilization loses its sense of itself, it becomes confused, and all the principles that seem to be certainties before now become, well, I don't really know. So you become a relativist of a sort, and the relativism then suddenly begins to become so pervasive that you can't tell the difference between a man and a woman, which is an extreme form of relativism, right? It's one thing to say, for example, I don't know about the existence of, platonic verities in the sky. It's another thing to say, I don't know about the existence of a tree outside my window. So the difference between men and women is as obvious as the existence of a tree. Why? Because no one comes into the world kind of unsexed, right? You come into the world and you don't even really have human beings, right? You have men, you have boys, and you have girls, and that's all you have. You don't have any. You might have a few people who have some intermediate sexual condition, the hermaphrodites and so on, but those are very minor. And so there's no such thing as human beings outside of this given biological framework. And I think what she's saying is when you start questioning even that, then you are kind of in civilizational la la land. So I think, and then she traces the decadence of the late Romans the decadence of the Weimar Germany. Certainly there was a lot of nihilism, a lot.
Yeah. And so he goes on, and you should listen to the whole conversation because Dinesh is, one of the smartest thinkers really out there. And he's a historian of sorts and just such an avid reader and student of history and philosophy and all those good things. So if you take a historical perspective, this isn't good. Like, this is definitely not good. And the result could indeed be this kind of hypercharged masculinity as the other thing, right? The other thing that's out there. So what I wish the left would start to understand, what I wish Joe Biden would start to understand, is that what they're doing is not right. It makes absolutely no sense. The idea that somehow, a young girl is supposed to be competing in a swimming race with somebody who was born as a man and thus has all this testosterone. I mean, come on, like that. It's just, it's beyond comprehension